Welcome to the Creative Penn podcast. I'm Joanna Penn, thriller author and creative entrepreneur, bringing you interviews, inspiration and information on writing craft and creative business. You can find the episode show notes, your free author blueprint and lots more at thecreativepenn.com, and that's Penn with a double N. And here's the show. Hello creatives, I'm Joanna Penn, and this is episode number 765 of the podcast, and it is Friday the 9th of August 2024 as I record this. In today's show, I'm talking to Thad McIlroy about his new book, AI in Publishing. We talk about lots of things. We both geek out in the AI space and we're both super positive, but we do have a really good discussion about why generative AI is so controversial in publishing when many other industries are embracing it, ways in which traditional publishers might be using AI tools, how platforms are monitoring and placing guidelines on AI work, and why Ingram blocked Thad's book, the future of licensing and synthetic data, the increasing importance of high-quality print, and book discoverability, and why Thad thinks this is the most exciting time in his 50-year career in publishing. So there are lots of links in the transcript. So we refer to things that both he and I know a lot about. So if you have been listening to the news, or I do share a lot of it on the show, obviously, but if you want to know more, go to the show notes within the transcription. I always have a transcription of the interview of the podcast. So you can always just go to thecreativepenn.com/podcast and you will find this episode. So that is coming up in the interview section. So in publishing things and a crossover with AI, as Audible is now testing an AI-powered search feature to assist users in narrowing down their audiobook search, as reported by TechCrunch. Select US customers, and it's always US customers, which annoys me. But yes, select US customers can interact with Maven, Audible's new personal recommendation expert that surfaces title suggestions based on users' specific requests. A user can use natural language to enter queries, and Maven will respond by providing tailored recommendations pulled from Audible's catalogue of nearly 1 million titles. For example, I'm looking for an uplifting fiction novel with a female protagonist. I think that most listeners would be more specific than that. But I think this is great because Audible's search is dire. Now, I've been a member of Audible for years, but I never use it to search. I always go onto Amazon and search and then see if there is an audiobook. And then I go through to Audible from there. So this is very, very good news for Audible listeners. It's also experimenting with AI curated collections and AI generated review summaries. Now, if you do have a look on Amazon regularly, you'll see that all of our books now have AI generated summaries and keywords and all of that at the top. So I think they could just be pulling from that. Of course, they could be doing it on the audio, and Amazon has their own models. They also have the potential to use other models which are on their bedrock. So it is really interesting. I also think this is a response to Spotify's AI-generated search, which is very, very good. In fact, I've even been considering closing my Audible account because I now mainly use Spotify for audiobooks. And if your audiobooks are not on Spotify, you are missing out on a bigger and bigger chunk of the audience, I think. But you never know. I think I'm going to wait and see what this Audible search is like. I mean, there are obviously some books still only released on Audible. But yeah, very interesting to see how that goes. Links in the show notes as ever. Now, Thomas Umstadt, who's been on the show, has an episode on his novel marketing podcast about how to avoid book marketing overwhelm, which has some great tips. And that podcast is not just for fiction authors. There are some shows like this one, which are definitely relevant to whatever you're writing. It's a very good long episode. You can read the transcription, but some of the tips, get some perspective. I think this is a very good one. Book marketing overwhelm can happen when you get lost in the screen. That's what I call it now. If you get lost in the screen in all the reports and the charts and whatever, and just going, then to get some perspective, really just consider how important is this really? Like seriously, go for a walk, get off social media, turn off the news, just turn off your book marketing if it's too much. I mean, this is how I do it. I do more like campaigns with the marketing, and this works really well with Kickstarter. In fact, I'm about to do a bit of a campaign for the first in series Stone of Fire, because that book 13, Spear of Destiny, is on pre-order for the 1st of September. So I'm going to do a sort of September push for that. But it really is a sort of, how important is this? If you're getting way too stressed, then maybe just stop. The second one is, and I really like this, Thomas says, reduce the stress about the costs of book marketing by getting or keeping a day job. So writing doesn't have to pay the bills, or simplify your lifestyle and reduce debt. And I like this one again, because if you want to sell books as a business, then you do have to think about it differently. If it's a hobby, then do you really have to do so much marketing? Why not just sell fewer books and be more relaxed about it? But this is where you have to decide what your definition of success is. But when I wanted to go full-time back in 2011, we downsized, we sold our house, we sold our investments. So we really kind of reset back to zero in order that I could start again. And of course, it took a while to get back up to further than I was before, but that was my definition of success. Plus also saving some money, budgeting, tracking marketing, so you know what's worthwhile. I definitely do not recommend borrowing or using credit cards to do book marketing. I know some people do talk about that, but I think it's crazy. I have never done that. I've always only spent the money that I have earned to carry on. And yes, sure, it ratchets it up much more slowly, but I think I'm quite fiscally conservative in that way. Again, you must decide what you want to do, but I certainly don't advocate that. Reducing the stress around book marketing is more important. Also, Thomas says, try to focus and ignore conflicting advice. And I know this is hard. I mean, I am just as responsible for anyone else for giving you more information every single week. But if you jump from thing to thing, then maybe none of it will work. For example, I still have a YouTube channel, and you might be listening to this on YouTube, but you'll notice there's no video. I used to do video interviews, but I really just was never comfortable with that. And I started on YouTube before I started this podcast. So my earliest YouTube videos are 2007, which is hilarious seeing younger me. But I made the decision to be audio first, and that really works for me, and made the decision not to focus on video, which again is why things like TikTok and even Instagram Reels and things I don't really do. So yeah, it's a really good episode. That's on the website is authormedia.com, links in the show notes, or you can just search Novel Marketing Podcast on wherever you're listening to this and have a listen to Thomas. Then I wanted to just give a shout out to Jason Hamilton, the nerdy novelist, who on his YouTube channel goes through the top 17 self-publishing companies. Now, I think that's a bit of a misnomer because you don't have to use all of those. But his channel also has a lot of AI writing tutorials, so I thought that might also be useful for some of you. Jason goes through the top 5, Amazon KDP, Kobo, Apple, Barnes & Noble, Google Play Books, and also talks about the aggregators like Draft2Digital and companies that can assist you like Pro Writing Aid. But of course, this is entirely focused on ebooks and doesn't cover all the platforms for the other formats. And I know this is hard for people starting out as there is so much language. There are lots of companies, lots of things you do need, but lots of things you don't need. So I get a lot of questions about how I self-publish. It's in my updated author blueprint, but also the article is under thecreativepenn.com/publishing, and it is how I professionally self-publish in ebook, print and audio, and it contains the companies I use and how I do that. And I'm wide in all of those formats. Like anything, this gets easier with practice. And to be honest, the publishing part is pretty easy. Once you decide on how you're going to do your publishing, it is pretty easy and repeatable. The writing and the marketing are always the challenging parts. Also, I do publish my books in all formats on my Shopify store, creativepenbooks.com, and that's for my books for writers. And if you want to level up your writing craft and business, I have an August special. You can get 30% off my ebooks, audiobooks, PDFs, and digital bundles for August at creativepenbooks.com. Use discount code August24 at checkout. Links and details on the show notes. That is creativepenbooks.com. Use August24 at checkout. Links in the show notes. So in personal news, I'm still in the first draft of my folk horror novel, The Vineyard book, and I'm in the last 20,000 words now. I know what's going to happen. I've made the decision about the ending, so I'm rocking my way towards that. I spent also this week, because my book cover designer, Jane, is going away, and if I want to do another Kickstarter before the end of the year, we need to mock up the special edition and all of this. So I actually spent about half a day with Midjourney, and if you're in the Patreon, I do have videos and things on how I use Midjourney. It's not a one-shot thing like any of these generative AIs. You don't just type in a prompt and then use that image. That is not how it works. So yeah, I spent about half a day with Midjourney and I got a brilliant image. I'm not cover revealing quite yet, but I'm thrilled with it. I'm like, this is totally what I wanted. So I made the image with Midjourney after hours and then got it to Jane, and she has entwined the vineyard with the letters, and the image is very, very cool. So I am just more than excited. You can hear it in my voice. I almost was going to pitch this book, but now I've decided that I'm just too excited about doing a special edition. I mentioned last week that there's this almanac with cool folk horror things, vintner folk horror, and I'm going to have special pages that come from the almanac. And so I'm more excited about the design elements than I am about like pitching it anywhere else. So what I thought is I'm going to do the special edition. I'm hoping to kind of have that launched on Halloween and then hopefully have the books out at the end of the year. I'm just kind of trying to calculate that at the moment. But yeah, I think that's going to be very, very cool. So I'll get that done. And what I'll have to do, because I won't be able to get it edited before then, my editor's booked for later in September, is that I'm going to mock up that special edition with the first draft. Which is dangerous. But what I do is on Book Vault, I mark it as draft proof edition, and then I set up a new ISBN, the actual ISBN, with the real edition later, and make sure that that other one doesn't get used. But this is the thing with a Kickstarter, you need to do images, you need to know the cost of the book and all of that kind of thing. And I'm also going to have sprayed edges. I'm still thinking about that. So, it's so good to be excited about this stuff, isn't it? And just on the last Kickstarter, so for Spear of Destiny, everyone should have everything. So hopefully you should have print books. Maybe if you're a bit further afield, it might still be on its way. But if you don't have what you ordered, so if you ordered the ebook and the ebook or the audiobook, those went out at the end of June. So please check your messages on Kickstarter in case you missed an email, or just email me and I can check for you, joanna@thecreativepen.com. So I also wanted to just mention, although I'm working obviously lots, I'm in this first draft and doing design, I am pushing my comfort zone physically because, as I've mentioned, I'm 50 next year. I've got some goals around my health and I've been talking about my powerlifting, but this is where the comfort zone is pushed. I have booked my first ever powerlifting competition. I've joined the British Powerlifting Association, and this competition is for novices. It's in early September, and my goal is to turn up. This is always my first definition of success. Turn up, join in. And the second one is to get 3 legal lifts. Now, I can do quite a lot of weight in these various lifts in the gym with my trainer, but there are rules. The rule handbook is so long. And when I got it, I wondered whether I wanted to bother doing this. Even things like what you wear, there are rules about that. So with the squat, for example, the crease of your hip has to be lower than your knee. And it's so funny because people say to me, oh yeah, I can squat. And I'm like, yeah, but can you squat this deep? and then with a bar on your back. And that changes the game, right? And so that is what I've been working on. So I'm going to knock my weight back in order to be able to do some of these legal lifts. And also I have to wear a singlet, and I'm laughing about that. It's hilarious. So there will be no photos, I assure you. But if I get 3 legal lifts, I will be very excited. But also, in terms of how this applies to you, I did want to say, this is a game with certain rules. So if I was just lifting in the gym for strength, it would be completely different. But if I want to go in a competition, and this is not to win, obviously, this is to just a personal goal, it reminded me that there are rules in any game you want to play. If I want to even enter this competition, I have to have all these things. For example, I had to buy another weight belt because a weightlifting belt is to support your core and brace against. And the one I had, it wasn't legal. It was Amazon's recommended one, which wasn't a legal one. So there are rules for this. And in publishing, there are rules. It is a game, and it's a different game if you want an agent and a traditional publisher. It's a different game depending on what country you're in, because your opportunities are different. It's also a different game depending on the genre. It's, as an indie, it's a different game to sell books on Amazon and want to rank high on Amazon to selling direct on Kickstarter or selling through your Shopify store. These are all different games. And the point is, it is very hard to try and play all the games at the same time. Like with this folk horror vineyard book, if I wanted to play the traditional publishing game, I would have to do it quite differently. And so I've decided I'm going to do the Kickstarter game and then do wide as I normally do. And that makes me happier, more excited, giddy really with excitement over the design and all of that. But this is the point. You have to identify the game you're playing, figure out if you really want to play that game, then sort of play according to those rules. For example, with traditional publishing, they usually want a brand new book. So there are examples, obviously, of highly successful books getting deals after they've been selling, but most of them want a new book. So you can't self-publish and then go to traditional publishers. So you have to really think about this and decide your game and then how to play it before you go trying to break all the rules. I feel like so many authors are frustrated because they're trying to play way too many games at the same time. So maybe that's the challenge this week, and maybe you can send me an email or leave me a comment and let me know what game you're trying to play, and maybe if you're trying to play too many, whether you can simplify. So yes, one of the reasons I'm doing this competition is because I want to do one in my 50th year, like more seriously, as in lift some proper weights in the competition. And I'm 50 next year, and I knew that I wouldn't be able to do that straight off the bat. So I'm going to need some practice. So I'm planning to do this one and then maybe another one before Christmas. And then next year, those are the ones that will count as part of my 50th year challenge. So I'll let you know how it goes. I've also joined a calisthenics gym, which is pushing me in all kinds of other ways, like doing handstands and stuff like this. And yeah, my body doesn't know what's hit it, but I'm enjoying it. I feel very energized by this. So yeah, what are you doing for your health? That would be another challenge, because remember, we are writers in a body. We have a body, so we need to look after our body. So thanks for your emails and comments this week. Ian said about Robin Finn's episode last week, I really like the tides framework that Robin presents as a way of thinking about the strengths of a piece of writing. Her concept of trigger lines is also very useful as a way to see where a piece of writing could be taken. Glad you like that, Ian. Eternal Student on YouTube said, thanks for a great show. Robin's words really connected with me at this particular moment when I am feeling stuck and thinking whatever I write is crap. We all know that feeling. I have just looked at her book on Amazon and read the start of chapter 1, step 1, and had an aha moment. Sold. Yes, I know this podcast sells books for people. So yeah, fantastic. Glad you like that. And also shout out to Kevin Tomlinson, fellow thriller writer and also the host of the Word Slinger podcast. Kevin sent a picture on X of the gorgeous hardback edition of Spear of Destiny. And Kevin's in the US, so that one has arrived. He said, check out that foil lettering. The book is beautiful. Well done. So thank you, Kevin. And definitely check out Kevin's Word Slinger podcast. I was on there recently. Johnny B. Truant has been on there a couple of times. Old school indies will know Johnny, of course, and lots more interviews and thoughts from Kevin as he goes through career change moments. So I appreciate his personal sharing over there. Okay, so please leave a comment on the podcast show notes at thecreativepenn.com or on the YouTube channel. You can message me on X at thecreativepenn. And when I say that, I really don't know the word now. You don't need to DM me, direct message me. You can just at me on X and I will see it. You can also email me, send me pictures of where you're listening, or of course, send me pictures of your graveyard and crypts and scary stuff, or maybe even your folk horror vineyard. So yes, Joanna at thecreativepenn.com. I love to hear from you. It makes this more of a conversation. So today's show is sponsored by Draft2 Digital, self-publishing with support. And this is one of the great reasons you might choose to publish through Draft2 Digital. They have a human customer service team who can help you, and sometimes that is what you need. You can publish ebooks to all the big platforms as well as library systems. You can also publish print books and they can help you through that process too. They have formatting tools as well as easy publishing. And remember, you can choose specific places to publish to. I use Draft2 Digital for my ebook distribution to Nook, library systems, and now even to Apple, because it takes a lot of the hassle out of wide distribution if you use a distributor for at least some of the sites. I also use their excellent payment splitting for my co-written book, The Relaxed Author with Mark Leslie Lefebvre, which is a great option if you're co-writing. There are no charges for formatting or updating your book. They take a distributor 10% of retail price on sale. No upsells, no service packages, no fees of any kind. Set your price to whatever you want, even free. Make as many changes as you want to your cover, your book. Distribute it to any and every sales channel you want. It's your book, your choice, your world. They also have marketing tools and promotional opportunities available. Draft2 Digital says, your book is your priority. Our priority is you. We build tools and services that let you focus on writing while we take care of layout, publishing, distribution, print-on-demand paperbacks, and more. Check them out at draft2digital.com, and that's with a number 2. And yes, with Draft2 Digital, you don't have to use them for every single site in every single format. You can just use them for the sites that you want to. And I definitely use them as a fantastic partner and have done for many years. So this type of corporate sponsorship pays for the hosting, transcription and editing, but my time in creating the show is sponsored by my community at patreon.com/thecreativepenn. Thanks to the 13 new patrons who've joined this week, and thanks to everyone who's been supporting for months and years. If you join the community, you get access to all my backlist videos and audio covering book marketing, as well as creativity, AI, mindset, business, and my patron-only Q&A solo podcast episodes. Now, for the first time, in fact, as I record this, it's today, I'm doing live office hours. So patrons can come live and get the help they need, and I'll demo AI stuff or I'll show you behind the scenes of self-publishing or whatever people need. Everyone in the community gets the recording, and I'll also publish the MP3 as well for audio-only fans. The Patreon is a monthly subscription, the equivalent of buying me a black coffee a month, and I certainly drink a lot of black coffee, or a couple of coffees if you're feeling generous. You get access to everything, all the backlist content. So if you get value from the show and you want more, come on over and join us at patreon.com, patreon.com/thecreativepenn. Right, let's get into the interview. Thad McIlroy is a non-fiction author and contributing editor, writing at the intersection of AI and book publishing, as well as a publishing consultant. His latest book is The AI Revolution in Book Publishing, a concise guide to navigating artificial intelligence for writers and publishers. So welcome back to the show, Thad.
Thank you very much, Joanna. It's good to be back. I was thinking, did we start talking first maybe 10 years ago? that we've been staying in touch.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and you've been on the show several times, and I always used to read your site, The Future of Publishing. And so, yeah, it's so good that we're on the same page now, I think, with AI.
We are indeed.
Yeah, so let's get into it. And I mean, we've all been using in this industry aspects of AI in publishing for years, like the Amazon algorithms, for example, or Google search. So why is the use of generative AI in particular so emotional and controversial in the publishing industry when other businesses are adopting it with enthusiasm? Like I know my husband's company is doing it, and there's lots of companies rolling things out, but in publishing, it seems like a no-no.
It really does. And it's such a fraught topic. It's such an awkward time to be talking to folks about technology when there's just a explosive in many ways and, something untouchable. But I think there's more than one aspect to it, right? There's on the one hand, this feeling of having been violated, that there's so much press about the AI companies having hoovered up, as is often said, the content. And people have this sense, authors have this sense, that every book of theirs has already been ingested into an AI system, which is thoroughly inaccurate, but not following the story closely. And you hear stories, hundreds of thousands of books. And so you don't have any sense as an author of the fact that it was actually a relatively small number of books that got into some of these large language models. But regardless, the sense is that everything got hoovered up. And then I think there's a sort of secondary sense that I get from some of my author friends where they say, well, if my book's already in there, then the AI can recreate books like mine, and that will push me out of business, that kind of sense. And that's a hard one to explain exactly why that's not likely to be true in any reasonable way. And then I get a sense from people too, there's a lot of mystique around AI, giving it a name like artificial intelligence and all the science fiction and so on. So there's that kind of technological apprehension, which again, you can understand that. And it then leads to this sort of sense that these machines are going to try and take over creativity, which again is a real sense of violation. So all of those things are churning around at the same time.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Like that last one, will machines take over creativity? Or people who leave comments on people like me and other people who use AI saying, oh, you should write your own books when I've got like 15 years of doing this, and that somehow it's taking something away. Whereas I was working with Claude.ai earlier today, I feel so much more creative when I work with Claude and chat. Is that the sense you get? I guess where I'm going with this is so much of the criticism is from people who haven't even tried these models in a proper way, like without a terrible prompt.
Yes, exactly. I see people, they'll try ChatGPT, usually that one first, sometimes Claude, whatever. But let's say ChatGPT, they try it. They do a couple of prompts, and the first one you do, you're kind of amazed. Wow, it sort of talks to me. And then you do the second one, the third one. It's like, well, it's not really answering the way I thought it would. It's not very clever what it's saying. And then they'll abandon it. I've talked to so many people who've abandoned it so quickly. And Ethan Mollick, the guy who wrote Co-Intelligence, which I consider the best kind of starter guide to AI, all-around starter guide, he says you need 10 hours. That's his sort of rough rule of the law of how to expose yourself to the technology before you can abandon it. After 10 hours, you can say, oh, to hell with this, it's not for me. But by that point, you've exposed yourself, you've worked with it, you know what it can do, and then you can make an informed choice.
Yeah, I think that's right. And to me, the sense of curiosity and play is so important, and it's iterative. I've been using the tools now, and I know you have for several years now, these generative ones. I've been using Midjourney. I've just been playing with version 6.1, with just been released on Midjourney. Obviously, Claude 3.5 Sonnet is the latest there. And even just as we speak today, there's some beta things from ChatGPT around a massive output. So this is moving really fast. And I know different indie authors using generative AI for different things already. But in your book, you do outline ways that traditional publishers are looking at using generative AI tools. So in what ways are publishers using these tools?
So in the book, I go at it from two angles. One, I have a short chapter where I quote from the big five, right? Because a lot of people in publishing look to them for not necessarily for guidance. It's not like they're going to inform us on the smart way to do these things, but what does HarperCollins say? What does Penguin Random House say? So I got a little section on that, and each of them are sort of tentatively feeling their way through it. Hachette makes a really interesting distinction where they say that there are two kinds of ways to use AI, operationally or creatively. And we, being a creative house, we banish the use of AI for creativity within Hachette, but we'll use it operationally. And you think, well, good luck with that differentiation. So then there's a whole series of use cases, which I think authors, many of your listeners would be familiar with, because publishers are using it in some of the same ways that independent authors are using it, whether it be editorially for kind of developmental tasks or in marketing. Of course, there's lots of interesting use cases for marketing, and I think both authors and publishers are doing some nifty things there. A little bit around production, that seems to be sort of easing in so far, but I see it on every side. And for a while, it was like, what doesn't do much here, but it does more stuff there. Now it seems it touches everything.
Yeah, you mentioned there the difference between operational and creative. And to me, things like marketing has to be creative.
Indeed. Indeed.
It really does. I mean, they might mean the writing of the book, but sometimes I feel like they're saying these things just to not get authors annoyed.
Exactly. Clearly, that's what it is.
Yeah, because I guess on audiobooks, you have a little bit on audiobooks in there. And I can't remember which publisher it is that's now using, I guess, 11 Labs for some audio.
Yeah, I think Simon & Schuster, was it, made a little announcement around that, or maybe it was HarperCollins. Oh, who knows which one of the big five. Yes, one of them did announce that. And I'm working with 11 Labs on my audio.
Oh, are you, for this book?
Yep.
Oh, that's interesting, because yeah, I started using them, but the biggest problem right now with the 11 Labs files, even though they probably are the best of breed service for AI audio, I mean, there's Google, but they don't have enough voices, whereas 11 Labs has so many. But Spotify won't accept their files right now as we record this at the end of July 2024. And of course, ACX won't either, because they still only take human files. So this is my pick. My pick is that either Spotify is going to buy 11 Labs, or that they will allow 11 Labs files by the end of 2024. What do you think about this?
I'm with you on that. I mean, because ACX has partially backed down, right? They're still sort of publicly poo-pooing it, but that you can do through ACX an automated workflow, which they're reluctantly accepting. And some of those files are now apparently inaudible. So Amazon has stepped back, and I think that all of the companies will see that they have no choice but to accept these files. And the whole idea that they're not good enough is clearly untrue at this point. They may not be quite as excellent as if you spend $20,000 on a top flight production, but they're very, very good for the average listener.
Yeah, and actually ACX officially doesn't do that, but Amazon KDP has a beta program for US indie authors. So US only, where you can opt in and use their AI generation, but it's published through KDP, not through ACX.
I didn't realize that. Oh, that's a very important detail.
Exactly. So that's why there's about 40,000 as of the last press release AI generated audiobooks from independent authors in the US right now from that program. And I'm actually keeping an audiobook ready to kind of try that. I think that's fascinating. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Well, that's such an interesting detail. Aren't they chickens? Right?
Well, I think that has a lot to do with unions, the narrator unions. Right. That are associated with ACX. But this is what's so interesting. But let's talk about the licensing deals, because there are still, I guess the famous one is the New York Times suing OpenAI over training data. But now we're seeing all these licensing deals, including News Corp, which owns The Telegraph. We've seen the Financial Times, The Atlantic. News Corp obviously owns HarperCollins, which wasn't included in the licensing, but I mean, who knows? And then recently an academic publisher, Taylor and Francis, licensed books to Microsoft. And here in the UK, the ALCS is looking at licensing for authors, and the Authors Guild in the US. So what do you think about this whole licensing thing? Are people going to just say, all right, we're just going to forget the past, give us some money and shake out that way?
All is forgiven. That'll be the day. It's so complicated, right? There's so many things at play here, and there's not going to be any easy answers. And the outcome, I think, is going to play out over years. This is not something we'll be resolving later this year or early next, anything like that. For the AI companies, it's clearly impossible to pay for everything. There's just too much content out there, unless it's a penny a piece kind of thing. There's no way they can license the whole of the web and all of the books that are out there. It's just not viable. So they're coming up with these short-term licenses. And the way I keep looking at those is that when they're standing in front of the judge later this year, next year, whatever, on the first court cases, they can say, oh, no, we respect copyright and we're doing some of these licenses to demonstrate our respect. But the judge is going to have to rule on, and then on appeal and appeal after that, whether or not it's a fair use, the initial original sin, whether that was fair use under the complexity of the law of fair use. But simplifying the fair use is the notion that is it fair for an engine to ingest copyrighted content, not to reuse it verbatim, but to learn from it the way we learn as human beings reading content. That's the sort of pro argument. And then the other argument is, no, you're stealing all this copyrighted content. So when the courts determine on that, let's assume that the courts side with the AI companies and say, no, you don't have to pay money. It's great that you're showing your willingness to do some licensing, but no, legally, you're not required to do so. The licenses will disappear very, very quickly at that point. I think they're just trying to make nice at this point during the litigation.
Yeah, you used the word fair before. And I mean, what is legal or what is accepted as fair use? I mean, fair is so difficult a word. Yes. But the thing is that the reality is with this technology, publishing and books, this is such a tiny, tiny, tiny perspective of generative AI. And in fact, again, this week, Google's DeepMind just got a silver medal at the Maths Olympiad. I don't know if you saw that, but this is huge for science. And of course, DeepMind has the AlphaFold, which does protein folding. So my husband works for a drug company, so I very much follow drug development, drug discovery, all of that kind of stuff. Yeah. We've got some incredible challenges in humanity that these tools will be useful for. And sometimes I just think, look, it doesn't matter. The rest of it doesn't matter. Save the planet, save us all from all these awful diseases, and you can have your data. I don't know. That's sometimes how I think about it.
Yeah, me too. When you think of how important these medical advances are, and clearly they are enabled by this technology, I mean, it's unambiguous that they're getting this enormous value from the technology. And then, you come back to publishing and you say, calm down, people, you're actually kind of small potatoes in the whole picture here.
Yeah, exactly. Although obviously you and I respect copyright and all of that kind of thing, and we would like to make money ourselves. But the other thing on the licensing, you mentioned that a lot of these licenses are for a couple of years. I like your angle around the court cases and looking good. But the other thing is that there has been some papers coming out on synthetic data, and some of the new Claude models originally, like I say originally, you know how fast it goes, but people had said, oh, the models are going to run out of data. And if they ingest their own data, it's just a load of sludge. But that's old news now. They're now finding that synthetic data can be very, very good, and can replace human data. So I was like, actually, we've got a very small window to get these licensing deals because synthetic data itself may replace the need to license.
I agree with that. I bet for your listeners, that synthetic data is something that's over their heads, understandably. You allude to how that works. You use the AI to create more text or more images that are in fact derivative of their existing engine, but appear as if fresh, as if new, and can be ingested without spoiling the pool. And I mean, if that's workable, which I still hear some controversy back and forth on that, but it only makes sense that could be solved as a problem. So this book I've just done on AI and book publishing, they don't need my book. They don't need it at all. There's no reason in the world for them to license my book.
Yeah, that is a good point, actually. And last year, and I know you referenced it in the book, which I was very thrilled about, my article on how generative search was going to change things. This is one of the reasons I've kind of stepped back from self-help books and nonfiction that can be done in other ways. A lot of the questions that I answer in those books, you can now find through the generative AIs. And so I've moved much more into the kind of writing where you can't get it from one of these tools. And what I liked about your book, even though you say they wouldn't need it, it's still your organization and your take on the industry. And of course, you've got a platform and people respect your opinion. So I think in that way, what you wrote was not something that could have come out of an AI system in that form. And I think it's worth reminding people, right? It's still worth writing these books.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But the point you're raising around nonfiction, I agree with you. And I've been interviewing a bunch of people and not reporting on it as yet because I'm still trying to figure out exactly how this is going to play out. But certainly what we're seeing around the possibilities of AI with nonfiction is exceptional, is extraordinary. And there it kind of loops over into the whole education space. And the amount of innovation on the education side, it doesn't quite parallel on the health side or on the health and medicine side, but is closer to that than it is to publishing. We're seeing some really interesting tech there. And what's the difference between a child in high school or you and I trying to find out the same information? And so I think the education space is quite analogous to the nonfiction trade publishing space. And I don't hold out a lot of hope for the existing container, as I keep coming back to that term container in the book, because the way we express our books right now, we have a very particular mental model of the book container, and I think we have to break that down. It's not to say that we don't still have a role as authors in creating content, but we have to get away from just thinking it's in 12 chapters, 243 pages, that kind of thing. It can't just be that anymore.
Yeah, I like this idea of the container. But what was interesting, there was an article in The Verge by the CEO of The Atlantic. I don't know if you read that about why they did the licensing. And he actually said, thank goodness we have a print magazine and thank goodness we have an email list. And that just made me laugh because myself and many other indie authors now, we're moving into special print editions. So I've just done my third Kickstarter, silver foil and hardback and all the things that traditional publishers have specialized in, we're now doing in order to change the container. So of course you can still get my book as an ebook, but I also have these more expensive containers that mean I can still make a living. So, I mean, do you see that happening more? Is that digital perhaps changes, but print just gets higher and higher quality?
Yeah, I see it on kind of two separate directions. Absolutely print getting higher quality. I've been considering that for years because as the world becomes more atomized and digitized, the affordances of print become more precious and more remarkable. And paying attention to print as a tangible instance of creative expression makes perfect sense. And I'm delighted to see authors thinking through all of these opportunities and deluxe editions, that kind of thing. At the same time, to me, the decontainerization of publishing should also be towards video expression, more expression with audio, multiple languages. So it's also decontainerizing within the digital sphere.
Yeah. And in fact, that's why 11 Labs is so interesting. And in fact, Spotify has a kind of auto translation function that they're using for very, very popular podcasts. So you can hear some of them in multiple languages in the host's voice. Yeah, which is, I mean, these things are just incredible, really. But let's move into search because I think another reason that the licensing is happening with things like, let's say, the Financial Times, which I read here in the UK, is that a lot of people are starting to move their searches into ChatGPT. So I mainly use ChatGPT for search and browsing. Of course, Bing is taking market share in the background from Google. And that's my main way I find books now is I'll go and have a chat with Chat about a various topic and then I'll ask for books and I'll do that. And then I'll go buy the specific book rather than starting on Amazon or starting elsewhere. And then also as we record this, Search GPT, which is OpenAI's product is in a limited release. So things are changing. So how do you think this generative AI search is going to change book discoverability? Because publishers use traditional media and search so much right now.
They sure do. And I'm concerned. I mean, I'm glad to hear that you're using ChatGPT in that way. I'm not sure. Well, let's try it at a different angle. As you said, to treat a ChatGPT, for example, as a search engine per se is not what it was designed to be. So it's not designed to be a fact engine, or it was not originally designed to be, let's say. Now, as they mature a little bit and they look at the existing landscape and they see that Google search has been most people's conduit into the web, and there's no way to take over the world without embracing the reality that people interact with the World Wide Web via the search metaphor. And people want to be able to ask questions and get answers, which again, I don't think it's the optimal use for a large language model, but it is a use when combined with a certain factual database. And so I feel like there's going to be a bifurcation within the availability of these engines, the features of these engines, some of which will be fact-oriented and others will be more, let's say, creative-oriented, or uses of the LLM that are not necessarily fact-related or dependent on fact. But ChatGPT, they're productizing it, as you say, as Search GPT, recognizing that bifurcation, that search is an individualized function that's not everything that we want to do. And that didn't answer your question. I think of it. What does this do to book discoverability? My concern, I am actually sort of more worried about it for publishers, on behalf of publishers and authors, because of the thing of being able to get the answer they need. Like, you can get a sufficient answer to many of your questions via these search GPTs, let's say. And if you can get that answer without having to go to the book, without having to be even aware that there's a book on that topic, discoverability is going to be a whole different kind of challenge for authors and publishers.
Yeah. And it's funny. One example is gardening. So I've never been into gardening, but now I'm like, I'm 49. I've got a garden, and I decided this year, like, seriously, I need to do some garden. And what's so awesome is you can take a picture. So I took a picture of my very messy garden and uploaded it to ChatGPT and said, okay, this is my garden. This is where I am in the world. Give me some ideas for garden design. And then from there, I carried on chatting around, okay, what kind of plants could I put up that would have flowers and that my cats wouldn't die of, and all of this. And I mean, the question, yeah, exactly. But the questions I asked, and then what kind of, if I go to the garden center, like, what's my list of the things I need to buy? And like, a couple of years ago, I would have bought a book on gardening, or 10 books on gardening. And I'm very aware that my behavior is changing. Actually, just on book discoverability, I don't know if you knew this, or I put it in my article, but I've gone back to trying to focus more on Goodreads, because I found that when asking ChatGPT how to, find me books with stonemasons in, for example, that it would use Goodreads reviews as well as Amazon, Shopify, and book blogs. But it was very interesting how much of Goodreads it used. And a lot of us had given up on Goodreads. And now I think maybe that's actually important.
Well, I've done a giveaway on Goodreads with my book, and going on to Goodreads, which I hadn't been on in a while because I'd pretty much given up on it. It's a bit of a wasteland in some sense. Like, many of my colleagues who were active, as I was some years ago, on Goodreads haven't been for years. I was looking at my old friends on Goodreads and seeing that they haven't done a thing. And so that was a bit discouraging, but at the same time, it's really vibrant in other ways, and it still is kind of one of a kind. So it has a role to play. We're raising several things there too, because one of the concerns where authors say, well, it knows about my book. Well, it knows about your book not because it read your book, but because it read Goodreads and it read what everybody says about your book. So that's how it got to know. So it didn't actually steal your book. It stole what people say about your book, which wasn't copyrighted, kind of thing. Or technically, maybe it was copyrighted, but in reality, anyone could scrape it. So that's another aspect of Goodreads. The other thing I'm thinking of as you're saying that, because you've just raised several issues there, but on the gardening side, you don't see a heck of a lot of books in bookstores on gardening anymore. But you do, and one of the things I've been pondering is the cookbooks, right? Because you obviously don't need cookbooks anymore. I mean, ChatGPT and its brethren do wonderful jobs with recipes, and you tell it what ingredients you've got, and it can give you 22 recipes. But people buy cookbooks because they're beautiful objects and they're a beautiful presentation format. And I think that's something that authors need to ponder still. And they buy travel books too, right? Which ChatGPT does a great job on travel related queries. And yet people still buy those books. So it's a good provocation to authors to say, well, look at what the machine can do and then think about what you can do far better than the machine, because there will always be things that we can do better than the machines.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that is definitely the way I'm thinking. You're right on the cooking. I do that too. I use it. I use it all the time for cooking.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, it is just so useful. Okay, just going back to the book, just to read a quote. You say, when publishers look at AI, they see few opportunities. When I talk to authors about AI, the world is their oyster. So I love that. And you say the possibilities are near endless. And we've talked about some of those. And I'm super positive always on this show. And I know there are negative sides. I know there are issues, but I choose to be a techno optimist. But many authors are scared, and they're scared of, as you mentioned, some of the things at the beginning, but they also worry about submitting to agents or publishers or competitions around where is the line when it comes to what do they count as using AI? So for example, Pro Writing Aid and Grammarly, which so many people use as part of their editing process, they are now powered by ChatGPT and these AI models. So if you're using any editing software, and we recommend that people should, and work with human editors, it's like that is completely different to clicking a button and then just publishing what you output. So what do you think as to this disclosure? What do agents and publishers, I mean, most of them don't even have an AI policy on their website. What should authors be thinking if they want to submit to the more traditional industry?
There's so much confusion, as you and I've talked about, and as you saw, Ingram flagged my book for using AI. And it was so deliciously ironic that here's this book that's meant to be an examination of the use of AI in writing and publishing, getting flagged by an AI algorithm that Ingram uses, and that therefore detected AI was in the book, in a section of my book that discusses on how authors can use ChatGPT interfaces, kind of thing. So, that kind of false identification of text says that there's a lot of confusion still out there. So on the one hand, they know that they don't want this, as you're saying, this unfiltered AI generated text. That seems pretty clear that we don't want that stuff somehow slipping into the ecosphere. But with the Pro Writing Aid and all of that, how much AI generated text, if you run a chapter of your book through ChatGPT and say, give me some constructive suggestions on how to improve that chapter, and you see that list, and then use, again, your own skills and your own verbiage to make those changes. Well, it is AI assisted at that point by any sort of definition. Of course, that's something that the algorithms are not going to be able to pick up on. So all of that kind of long-windedness on my part, but we did a webinar back in May looking very specifically at AI detection and how good the AI detection software is. And it's good, but it makes mistakes like everything else. And no machine can reliably detect whether AI was used if someone puts their mind to not being sloppy about it. So it can't be found. But then it's like, why, publisher, do you want to find this? And again, it's that kind of inchoate fear where we don't want whole books with authors lying about their use of it. Well, that's not what's going to happen, publisher. That's not the way it's going to play out. And you're going to be able to spot those books without a machine. So just calm down, accept the fact that authors are starting to use these tools very productively and very constructively. And that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing.
Yeah, it just feels like it's going to take some time before everyone calms down and before everyone realizes that they are using the tools. For example, book cover designs, there's this sort of vocal anti-AI imagery, but now Adobe Photoshop and all the main tools use AI in their packages. So I don't even know how anyone can do a book cover right now without using some form of AI in the same way that this editing software has got AI in. So it's almost like the lines are so blurred.
Yeah, they are. I've talked to a designer. I was on a webinar or seminar actually in Denver a few months ago, and this designer, he's absolutely fastidious. We don't allow AI, blah, 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 blah. So that you see those kind of camps too, where will not let AI touch any of this or that. And I think, well, yeah, like you're saying, that's going to change really quickly.
Yeah, or people are going to have to be painting and, well, then even say you do a painting that you want on the front cover of a book, you still have to take a picture of it. And most of the photo editing software has AI in it. I also think that maybe with the launch of Apple Intelligence that will be on the new iPhones and the iPads, and which of course is powered by OpenAI and will also, I think, be powered by some of these other models, that's going to just put it on people's devices. So I almost wonder if this is, and I've said this before, is this year one? This is like sort of 2007 for ebooks when, you remember all that stuff. Oh, these are awful. No one's ever going to do this. And the tsunami of crap for self-publishing. And it just feels like that time.
Yes, indeed. But Ethan Mollick makes this point that I've seen a couple other people make too. This is the worst AI you'll ever be working with. And so at those moments where, like for you and I, where we're like, oh, wow, I can do this. And then you hear someone say, this is the worst that you're ever going to see. It's going to get, just by an order of magnitude better. And you try and get your mind around that at this point. But clearly that's the case. This is 2007 in ebooks. And if you think you play it out 3 years from now, 5 years from now, it's really going to be exceptional. But you also point with the Apple AI, what some people are commenting on their approach of trying to make the AI invisible, which in a sense is what ProWriting Aid and Grammarly do. The AI is semi-visible, but it works in the background as it does with other spell checkers and grammar checkers. So Apple is kind of intimating a future where everything is AI enabled and nothing is AI specific.
Mm. Yes, and the word or the letters AI is a bit like the internet. It's almost meaningless as a term because it encompasses so much, and our life and our business practices and our creativity change so much with the internet, and they're going to change so much over the next 20 years. With AI, right? I mean, I love it. I'm grinning here. I know you're grinning. We're both excited about this. And I kind of hope that that's what people will come away with. But let's just keep focusing on what happened to you with Ingram for a minute, because this is what people are worried about. They're worried about being banned by this overenthusiastic algorithm. And not everyone is Thad, and you were able to get hold of Ingram and they're helping you sort it out. But for example, Amazon's algorithm has banned people not actually necessarily over AI use, because you can just tell Amazon that you're using AI now. There's a disclosure thing when you publish. But this kind of thing is what people worry about. So if a normal author listening has an Ingram issue, is there a process to follow in terms of appeal, and where do you think the lines are?
Yes, I was lucky in that sense. Although I would have stood my ground, I wasn't trying to say to them, you should give me an exemption and pay attention to my problem. I was just trying to raise the issue. And I think every reasonable person accepts that these platforms do need to curate the content that they release into the public. And we don't want hate, and we don't want this, we don't want that, we don't want sexual, whatever kind of content. So that we accept that there has to be some kind of filtering. Good. Okay. So then these platforms say we're also filtering around AI, which Ingram claims they're doing at this point as well, in a less subtle way than Amazon is. And so books are going to get caught, as you say, sometimes for AI, sometimes for other things. And the way Ingram does it right now, I got the notice on Friday. There's a button saying click here to appeal it. Click, register your appeal with one line box in which you can explain why you're appealing. And then you get an acknowledgement back saying, we'll get back to you within 2 weeks. And then I Googled it and I could see on Reddit and other places, I got banned by Ingram and it took 2 months to get it resolved. And I thought, well, that's ludicrous. And that was the big point I was trying to make to Ingram. It's because you're so powerful, you have a responsibility that comes with that power. And you cannot just banish someone and tell them that the invisible court of appeal may or may not get back to them within 2 weeks or 2 months. That's not a workable system.
Yeah, and I encourage authors to join organisations like the Alliance of Independent Authors, and there are some other author organisations as well. But certainly Ally has an ethical author policy around AI, and it's just we're more powerful together, I think, is the thing. And an individual author, it doesn't have so much say. But I wanted to just return to what you said earlier, which was these platforms don't want this unfiltered AI generation, and that these are the worst models we're ever going to get. And I definitely found Claude 3.5 Sonnet. I had a real moment. I've had a couple of these moments. I'm sure you have too.
Yeah.
When you're like, oh my goodness. And it was interesting with Sonnet because I was thinking, do you know what? I already do not consider myself the best writer in the world. It's never been a thing where I've thought, oh, well, I have to be the best writer, because we know that's completely ridiculous. So if an AI system is a better writer than me, how big a deal is that? And then I decided actually that wasn't a big deal because it has far more data than me, a bigger brain in inverted commas. And thus it comes to, well, what is the nature of what we do? And it's about our creativity and about our spark that starts the process. And my process is changing, but what I want to create continues. And these bots and agents, as they emerge later on this year, next year, they're going to do my creative bidding as such. That to me is very exciting. But the reality is there are companies now that are looking at generating to market. So for example, let's say you type in a search term and then the AI can generate a book to fit that. That's what people are scared of. So how are you navigating this? I mean, we talked a bit about nonfiction, but what about fiction and the different forms of creativity people have?
Yeah, that's such a great sort of heart of darkness concern. And indeed, when you try and ponder, let's say genre fiction, because it's easy to talk about genre fiction, because in one sense, the essence of genre is repeatability, right? That you're giving people more of what they actually want, in a sense. They're reading within a genre, so they want books that fit within, sometimes it's a looser definition, but it is a constraint, right? Genre defines a constraint versus so-called literary fiction, which supposedly has no constraints. So it's easier to imagine the machine taking on the challenge of writing within a particular narrow genre and perhaps succeeding in producing a work that a reader would enjoy as much as they might enjoy something that a human had created within that same genre. It's not, I don't think it's possible today, but it certainly is conceivable, I think, for you or I to see that 2 years from now, whatever, a little bit down the road. But for some reason, I can't get worried about that. The scenario in which all creative writers are supplanted by machines, it doesn't ring true for some reason. As much as I'm enthusiastic and as much as I think there's so much promise here, I just don't see the human in the loop disappearing. And even if if creative writers rely more and more on these tools, it's still their unique take on the way they use the tools and what they accept from the tools and what they ultimately pull together as the whole manuscript. And that's going to be human educated to whatever extent, as far as I can see, as we move forward. I'm not afraid of the machine replacing the author.
No, I agree with you from the author perspective. So we are, people listening, we are the creative ones. We create. We're never going to stop creating. What is changing is the business model.
Yes.
And if you think about some of the very genre-specific publishers who have imprints where they really do they have rules that they give to writers, follow these rules for this type of book. You know who they are. We don't need to mention them. But there are those publishers, and I look at them and I think their data set, if they fine tune one of these models, I mean, they're already paying authors very little money for these types of books. Those are the types of publishers who I think may well be looking at this. Now, and the business person in me goes, they would be crazy not to be looking at this.
Yes,
So almost like, no, I agree with you. I'm not scared at all. Humans are going to keep doing human things, but publishers who are businesses who return money to shareholders, it's a different story. I don't know. Am I being unfair there? They do have big data sets.
They do indeed. And yeah, I mean, you can see the possibility that some portion of the marketplace is subsumed in that way. When you put it that way, I can certainly see it. Well, I think about the issue around, let's switch it over for a second to book translation. Like that, there's another one where translators are justifiably very apprehensive about the future of humans in the translation of books. In my book, I've had translated using ChatGPT into 31 languages. No human who was fluent in those languages has looked at those books. I did some quality checking by doing a reverse translation afterwards. I translated into French and then used ChatGPT to translate the French back into English and compared the English, and it was fascinating, actually, how close it was and how different it was, but it was acceptable. It was good enough for sure. And so clearly some portion of the translation of the people who work in translation, that work's disappearing. But other work, the higher level translation work, one study I just saw a couple of days ago was showing that work is actually increasing. And so the more talented and more skilled translators are getting more work, while the less skilled ones are getting less work. And so not to be a pejorative around genre writing, I know there's a lot of arbitrariness in these kind of distinctions, but you could see that some portion of the writing profession could be curtailed with these tools.
Which is why I focus much more on author brand. And I mean, that's what I love about Kickstarter and our Shopify stores now is that we're not competing on a marketplace like Amazon. We are going to our customers and doing email marketing and all of this kind of thing. And so then what you write and the connecting with people becomes so much more important. Yeah. So as we come to a close, I do want to finish on a positive note because, as I said, you and I are both techno optimists. So what are you excited about and what attitude will serve authors listening as we all try and surf this wave of change?
I've been working in publishing now over 50 years, which is like saying I'm a million years old and therefore should be put out to pasture. And yet this is the most exciting moment I've seen in publishing in those 50 years. I couldn't be more delighted with what's going on and more optimistic about the future of creativity, of creative expression, of the ability to reach readers and to delight readers with creative output. But it takes a really open mind. You have to get beyond the container. You have to get beyond, as you're saying, you do as an author, you're redefining your own role. You have to be willing to redefine your role to take advantage of the opportunities that are here, because there are a gazillion opportunities.
Yeah, exciting times. And I hope we'll keep having these conversations.
One of the things we didn't talk about, of course, is that I use the LeanPub platform, which not enough authors are aware.
Yes, tell us a bit more about that. Yeah.
LeanPub's fascinating. It's mostly technical books that end up on there, which is, it shouldn't only be those, but it is pretty much so far. Because it's a book about AIs, which is obviously changing so quickly. Therefore, you think, well, doing a book is ludicrous. Well, the LeanPub platform allows you to continually revise the work. And people who buy from you on that platform, they get updates. And it's built into the platform. So if you want to get the ongoing updated version of the book, it's on LeanPub. If you want a print version or a Kindle version, of course, it's on Amazon. It's on all the other platforms, but the only updated version, which is the same price as the Kindle version, is available through LeanPub.
And those translations you mentioned, are they all on LeanPub as well, or are they on Amazon?
Well, that's another big thing that we do a separate show on. I called up Michael Tamblin, the guy who runs Kobo, and said, Michael, I'm not going to upload 31 translations on Kobo. You're going to have to find a way where I can upload once and somehow link these translations, which is what LeanPub offers. If you go to the English page for my book on LeanPub, you'll find all 31 translations there, and they're linked to sort of the mother page. There's a Anglo-centric conception there that each of the other languages are adjunct to the English version, which makes sense in a way, though it's non-obvious, but it does make sense. And so in the short term, to be able to take advantage of this technology and create, I mean, I could have done 50 translations, but I'm not going to upload 50 different files, each with a separate ISBN to Amazon. So there's a big transition going on there.
Yeah, that is so interesting. I think the same for audiobooks. You should just be able to change the voice, change the language, change whatever you want on an app. Like, you shouldn't have to just take the one thing. It's the container, like you said. I love that idea.
Have you used the 11 Pubs reader, the one they released a few weeks ago?
11 Labs reader. No, I haven't yet.
Laurence Olivier, you can have Judy Garland, Laurence Olivier reading your book, Sir Laurence Olivier. So I've put my book into Sir Lawrence reading it. It's so hilarious to hear his voice, his wonderful accent reading your book. And you think, well, what's the future of audiobooks if you can just read the ebook? The only thing that's going to prevent that is DRM. But more and more people are going to say, no, you don't have to create a separate audiobook. You work with one of these reading systems that does a 99.9% good enough job just taking your book on the fly.
Yeah, exciting times. And I love that after 50 years in the business, you're still experimenting and trying new things. You know, you're my hero. That's what I want to be like.
You will be. I know you will be.
Well, thanks so much for your time, Thad. That was great.
Thank you. Great to be back.
I hope you found that episode with Thad interesting and that it gave you a little insight into how AI might be adopted in the wider industry. Everything we discussed is linked in the transcript, and definitely check out Thad's book as well so you can read more widely around the topic. I know this is an emotional one, although I think it's getting less so. And as ever, I love to hear your thoughts. Please leave a comment on the podcast show notes at thecreativepenn.com or on the YouTube channel, or message me on X at thecreativepenn, or email me, joanna@thecreativepenn.com. Send me pictures of where you're listening. So next Monday, I'm talking about A Touch of the Madness, creativity in writing and filmmaking with Larry Kazanoff, who has been part of films like Terminator 2, Platoon, Mortal Kombat, and more. And we have a great conversation. Larry is just a happy guy and a creative guy, and it was lovely to chat with him. In the meantime, happy writing, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening today. I hope you found it helpful. You can find the backlist episodes and show notes at thecreativepenn.com/podcast. And you can get your free author blueprint at thecreativepenn.com/blueprint. If you'd like to connect, you can find me on Facebook and X at The Creative Penn, or on Instagram and Facebook at JFPennAuthor. Happy writing, and I'll see you next time.